Hello and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I'm going to be doing my 14.2B ADC tier list. So if you enjoy the content, like, subscribe, and let's get into it. So to begin with, mainly I want to talk about two things, and that is Lethality Marksmen are performing really well at the moment. This is because Youmuu's, Collector, Hubris, Edge of Night, and Schroeder's Grudge make for great options on a lot of champions. Plus these items are just very strong at the moment compared to a lot of the crit options, which are on the slightly weaker side. Of course, we are seeing adjustments to that next patch, but as of this patch, Lethality tends to be the optimal thing to go on a lot of marksmen. Other than that, we saw health shards get introduced into the game as opposed to the armor magic resist options, which hurt mages in the bot lane because a lot of people were still not taking magic resist when they had a mage in the bot lane, either because the mage was being utilized as a flex pick, or people just didn't acknowledge they were against a mage, so this did end up hurting mages. They lost a bit of win rate, but some of them are still relatively strong. Some of them did get buffed this patch, and I want to cover it. So to begin with, Varus is performing alright. He's got loads of builds which he can go, whether it's like an AP on hit, lethality flex kind of option. Lethality build tends to be his least performant within solo queue. On hit is what I'd very much recommend going, especially with a lot more health within the game. Bork Varus works quite nicely. AP, of course, is also very much an anti-health stacking variant of Varus. Both these options do outperform his lethality build, but for the most part, he's like a jack of all trades. B tier is where I'm going to leave him for the moment, but if you utilize his flexible values, then he can move up towards the A tier. Tristana is also going to move in my B tier. She's doing fine. Once again, she can't really utilize lethality options like a lot of champions, but she still values things like Kraken Slayer, Navori, can opt into things like IE if she does want to, but she's just not performing to the same level as a lot of the other lethality marksmen, so I'm going to leave her within the B tier. Vayne got a huge bump this patch. Of course, loads of champions would have lost to DPS with a lot more champions running health. Vayne it doesn't gain, but still has the same time to kill. She does a decent amount of true damage, max health. This can be utilized in either her Q max build, where you go something like an Essence Reaver, or a Trinity Force. These builds are still fine. Of course, people can opt into these if they need to. But the main thing here is like the Kraken Ginsu's variant seems to be performing very well. Ginsu's, of course, being buffed next patch, does look very good as a solid on-hit marksman option. Swain is also going to be within my S tier. Swain has very good synergies within the bot lane, which can be utilized quite nicely. I really do just recommend going things like Violize and Leandries, sitting on something like a Lost Chapter. Malignance tends to be pretty bait on this champion. Roa is an option. Of course, that is also being buffed next patch. But for this patch, I would very much just recommend sitting on the Lost Chapter, looking at Violize, Leandry. You spike really hard off this 2-item core, and then you can opt into your Malignance as a third option. You can also opt into things like Zonya's. Riftmaker makes for a great last slot. Of course, once you have a decent amount of bonus health stacked up, that AP translation is quite nice. But overall, he's just a solid S tier pick. Not the best of the S tier, but definitely up there. Moving on, so Twisted Fate is a new addition to the tier list. He is very much liking the fact that he got a bunch of crit changes last patch. Overall, some of the quality of life changes, like towards his W, feel really strong and actually make him quite obnoxious to play against. If anything, Twisted Fate is like a full role flex pick. I've seen people play at support. Actually had a pro player play at support in one of my games today, and that looked really good. He ran Predator and Ghost, was running around the map, just utilizing his range with RFC and a lot of the crit scalers on his kit. Other than that, though, like, you can go AP. AP Twisted Fate is still a perfect, it is really strong actually at the moment. So yeah, two very viable builds, full role flex pick on top of, just lots of values on this champion. Very good at the current time. Just not as good in ADC role as like mid lane. Mid lane Twisted Fate, I'm pretty sure I put in the S plus tier, or like S tier as like a high option. He is very good there. Yasuo is going to be in my S tier. So Yasuo, once again, is still a really good ADC. His best role is ADC. Has been for a while. He works really nicely with like Flash, Exhaust as his summoner spells. And then you can opt into things like a Kraken Slayer, an IE, and then go like Durability, Death Stance, Shield Bow, BT, GA. There are options there. Overall, just performing quite well at the moment. Definitely a solid marksman option. Of course, the other thing is more health within the game makes Bork a valuable first option on him as well. Can be opted into alongside the Kraken Slayer, or just one or the other. Both work quite nicely as a first slot option. Senna. So Senna I had in the S tier last patch because of the abuse of support, double support items. Of course, that got nerfed coming into this patch, but Senna is still a solid S tier ADC. She's actually performing really well even without the support item abuse. Yeah, like lethality options just being really good at the moment, makes her really powerful. I know a lot of people go Umbral Glaive, but I'd very much recommend going Youmuu's as a first option. Hubris is also great on this champion if you can get it stacked up. Collector is also great. She does value crit and values the lethality on this item as well. Having lethality scalers within Senna's kit actually makes her a really good lethality user, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, Senna, solid S tier option at the moment. Jhin, I'm a Jhin hater. I've never been a huge fan of this champion, but I can't deny that this champ does deserve an S tier spot. His lethality builds are really strong at the moment. You can of course still opt into things like Storm Razor, IE. That build is still a perfectly viable option, but for the most part, the Youmuu's, the Hubris, the Collector, they work so well on him, and it just gives him so much power. The main thing with Jhin is he does fall off, but with the likes of Hubris, that damage does not really, the damage doesn't fall off as much as it used to. He can maintain it throughout the game, and he just does so much, so much damage. That's the main thing here. Jhin is back to, rather than just being a primarily util focused champion, back to being more of a damage focused champion, which is what makes him very strong. Ezreal got huge buffs this patch. The main thing here is a lot of people are playing Ezreal, and if you're not good at Ezreal, this champion is not worth really playing. But if you're good at playing this champion, he is very, very strong at the moment. With Essence Reaver being buffed next patch, he is getting some compensation nerfs, but for the most part on this patch he is a very strong pick. Essence Reaver, Navori, Manamune of course being very strong 3-item core. He is more of a early game skew champion these days. Do keep that in mind, you do want to close games early on him, but yeah, performing really well. The AD ratios did wonders for him, and it puts him in a very good spot. Samira is going to be within my A tier. So Samira, even though she is as one of the main collector abusers, isn't performing to the same level of picks like Nyla and MF. These two are very strong at the moment. But if you get ahead of the curve, you're able to get things like Collector and Hubris, and then IE, Bloodthirster, Shieldbow, LDR, stuff like this. She is very powerful, but she doesn't, even if you do so well with this champion, if you can shut her down, she can be very hard to pilot in team fights. There is a lot of CC at the moment, so you do have to keep that in mind. Closing games, once again, is really important on a lot of these snowballing marksmen. Tanks are very durable later on into the game, which can make it very hard to, once again, pilot these champions. So do keep that in mind. She's not quite an S tier pick, but definitely a solid A tier. And if you're able to snowball, then yeah, close to the S tier. Karthus is going to be within my A tier. So Karthus got buffed this patch. She's doing a lot better. Was underperforming both jungle and ADC, and with the stat shard changes, it did hurt him slightly, but the buffs were still very nice for ADC Karthus. APC Karthus. So puts him in a solid spot. Works really nicely as an A tier magic option. Not quite as strong as the Swain. Swain does have really insane team fighting and decent damage. But yeah, Karthus still a very solid option. Draven. Okay, so Draven is definitely better than Samira in his current state as a snowballing marksman if you can pilot the champion well. Samira is easier to play than Draven, but Draven, if you can pilot the champion well, he is incredibly strong. Lots of the high tier pro players at the moment are playing this champion, as he can be, or he's considered very much free LP in the right hands. Jinx is very close to my S tier. She's probably the best crit marksman at the moment, compared to a lot of the other options. She didn't get hit as badly by the wave of lethality champions. Got buffed towards the end of last season. I do definitely think that helps her. Yeah, once again, it's like Storm Razor or Kraken Slayer into the likes of IE, and then Phantom, RFC, Runan's Hurricane all work quite nicely. It's like 3rd, 4th item options, and then things like LDR, GA can be utilized quite nicely to round out your build. Twitch is a solid A tier option. He was in my S tier last patch. I still think he is very close to the S tier. Bork, of course, being his main first item, getting buffed this patch against most champions, does definitely help him. However, he does struggle into some of the lethality options. He does beat Jhin. That is one main thing. Jhin is very popular, and Twitch does stomp this champion. But yeah, the main, with lethality champions being very strong at the moment, does find himself within the A tier. Nyla is within the S plus tier, so Nyla really heavily abuses Collector and Navori. Incredibly strong 2-item combo. Can opt into things like a Phantom Dancer or a Shilbo as a third slot. Bloodthirster, LDR, GA. She doesn't tend to be as reliant on LDR as a lot of the other marksmen, as she can, she has built-in armor pen scaling on her Q, I believe, which converts at like 4%, I think it's like 20% of her overall, or so once you have 100% crit, it's like 20% of her critical strike chance or something like that. It's converted into, or not converted, but like it has that scalar. God, I'm butchering this. But yeah, has built-in armor pen, isn't as reliant on it as a lot of the other champions, but very strong at the moment, has insane combos. Senna, Taric, these are the main two ones to focus on, but I believe there are a lot of other ones which she does synergize quite nicely with. Yeah, great champion, very much deserving of the S plus tier. Sivir is going to be within my B tier. She's like a low B tier option. Obviously, lethality Sivir is a thing of the past. You don't really see that anymore. The main thing here is, I believe, Essence Reaver and Static Shiv are like competitive first options. Of course, you can go into things like Navori, Phantom, Bloodthirster, but she just doesn't perform to the same level as a lot of the other marksmen, so she finds herself within the B tier. Hui is doing alright. He's a decent AP bot laner. Not quite as strong as a lot of the other options, but definitely one of the harder to pilot ones. Of course, if you put in the games, put in the hours, he does definitely rise up as a very solid option. He is more of an early game, mid game skew champion now. He was very much like a late game considered when he first got released, but yeah, now more of a mid game champion. Does a huge amount of burst damage if you're pairing the R with your QW. It does a huge burst of damage. QE is great for wave clear, QQ is great for trading, EQ got buffed, does the fear duration is now scales from 1 to 1.5, which is a great change for him, allows him to be a lot safer within lane. Overall, just performing a lot better, solid B tier option. Lucian. I'm going to pair Lucian and Kalista together. I hate these two picks. The amount of people who I see pick them and then just kind of get like an early advantage and then not be able to convert it into anything, just it seems too common, which is why I put these two champions in B tier. I definitely do think Kalista is better than Lucian if you're looking for an early game champion. She spikes incredibly hard of 2 items. However, I have had like, I think I've had like 3 pro players play Kalista in my games recently, and all of them lost. Like they got the 2 items, they were ahead in the laning phase, and they just couldn't convert their advantages. Terminus is what most of them go as like a third option. But even then, like, definitely just doesn't have the DPS output of a lot of the other marksmen. Definitely struggles into, like, slows, control, stuff like this. Even with, like, strong pairings like the Maokai, wasn't really finding, like, the mid-game advantages or late-game team fights which she needed to really bring herself into the game. And, yeah, the main thing is these two champions do just get outscaled by a lot of the marksman pool at the moment. Lots of champions have more range than them, yeah, which definitely does hurt them. So they're B tier options. Of course, if you can very much utilize their 2-item power spikes, they still do definitely work, but not as consistent as a lot of the other picks. Caitlyn is going to be within my B tier. So Caitlyn is doing fine. Her lethality options are definitely the way you want to go at the moment. They do outperform her crit builds of the Stormrazor and the IE, but with obviously when I was coming through my next patch, I imagine the gap will be closed even more. Collector is still a great option on her. I would recommend something like a Stormrazor Collector, i.e. Bloodthirster, LDR as like your 5-item combo. I know there are some people who go like Titanic Hydra because you can get like a double headshot interaction, but when I was looking at the data, it's it's not frequent enough and the win rate just isn't really there to really recommend it. Of course, if more people I would consistently put it off, then maybe it's got some sort of like merit to it, but for the most part, I'd recommend just going standard or lethality. Both these options work quite nicely on her, but not quite as like consistent as a lot of the other champions, and definitely more of an early game focus pick, whereas a lot of other champions can be utilized later on into the game as well. Xayah just isn't performing very well. Definitely one of the biggest losers of the crit marksman. Yeah, definitely just one of the biggest losers. Kaiser not doing too hot either. Of course, if you can pilot the champion well, she is very hard to pilot. That is the main thing here. The difference between a good Kaiser and a bad Kaiser is really big. She's ironically probably one of the hardest marksmen to play, which is surprising, as a lot of people wouldn't rate her that highly, but it's definitely noticeable. If you're piloting this champion well, you're getting like solid rotations of your combos off. You're utilizing your WR combos. I believe the build is something like Kraken Slayer and then Ginsu's Terminus maybe, or Kraken Slayer, Terminus, Ginsu's. There are options there. If you're picking the right build in the right games, you're utilizing the full advantage of her kit, her mobility, her tempo, then she is definitely a solid pick. But for the most part, for the average player, I'd only really recommend her as a C tier pick. Just not quite there as consistent as a lot of the other options. Ashe definitely struggling. Losing the Trifold strike passive on Triforce was one of the biggest hits towards this champion. She just doesn't spike as hard off Kraken Slayer Triforce as she used to. She's still fine though, works quite nicely as a support within competitive, but doesn't have that merit quite as much in solo queue. More of a B tier pick at the moment, but doing fine. Still a very simple to play champion. But if you want a simple to play champion who's very strong at the moment, play MF. MF is like the best marksman in the game by quite a bit, I believe. Collector, Youmuu's Collector, Hubris all work quite nicely on her. Well, incredibly nicely on her. You can opt into things like Edge of Night, Chevelda's GA. Has great build options. Just really does way too much damage in her current state. Lethality options obviously being nerfed next patch does hurt her, but still really, really strong pick. I don't imagine she'll drop out the S+ tier. Seraphine, also still a solid S+ tier. Everyone getting a bit more durability was great for this Enchanter-like champion. Really is really, really powerful at the moment. You can, I believe, opt into both like an AP heavier build and like a supportive build. Both options are viable. Stealth of Flowing Water is like a great option on her. Values for movement speed, values the AP. I imagine is also fine if you have a lot of people who can utilize it. Otherwise, I just wouldn't really recommend it. Seraph's Embrace is probably, I believe, is the optimal way to start your build if you are going down this route. Rylai is great if you're getting the double E hit, because then you root people, you stun people, which is really important. Overall, this champion just has a lot of merit, lots of CC, decent damage, great team utility, just really powerful in her current state. Zoe is going to be within the C tier. Honestly, like the weakest of the C tier options, probably the closest champion to D tier at the moment. She's getting buffed next patch. Her builds just aren't doing great. Admittedly, a lot of people are trolling her builds as of the moment. People should be going like experimental hexplay. I believe it does quite heavily underperform compared to like a standard Stormrazor IE build or a static IE build. But even then, she still definitely does underperform. The buffs are needed, and she should be in a lot better of a spot. Ziggs is going to be in the C tier. He is also being buffed next patch. He is not doing great compared to a lot of the other AP bot laners. He got pro jailed for a bit, and then they nerfed him quite heavily, and then he was performing really well in solo queue, and I believe they nerfed him because of that. Overall, he finds himself within the C tier at the moment, but the buffs should definitely help him. Veigar is also within the C tier. Got buffed last patch, but also isn't performing quite as well as a lot of the other AP bot laners. He's just underperforming a bit at the moment, but definitely closer towards being a B tier AP option. Kog'Maw is also going to be within my C tier. He's underperforming for a very simplistic champion. The builds just aren't doing as well. Of course, on-hit buffs are coming in, and on-hit buffs towards Ginsu's are coming in, which should definitely help this champion. A lot of the on-hit marksmen are just underperforming slightly at the moment, which is why these buffs are happening. But he's still a solid option. If you want someone who is great at tearing apart frontline, and you can kind of play like a Protect the Kog'Maw comp, then yeah, there's a lot of merit to playing this champion. But as of the moment, he's a bit on the weak side, so I'd kind of recommend just playing more of a lethality option. Aphelios, does definitely rise up the higher rank you go, but this champion is doing fine, honestly, for like standard play. He is a solid option. But yeah, like I said, elite play, he definitely does rise up. He didn't get, well, he got nerfed very early on into the season. Obviously, the biggest, well, I believe he was one of the biggest winners of the lethality options and shot up to like a 52% win rate, which is like unheard of for Aphelios. This champion rarely goes above 48. Right now, I think he's sat around like 49. He's fine. Yeah, the build options are like Stormrazor, IE, and then like a standard like crit marksman variation. Yeah, he's a solid B tier pick. Definitely one of the lower options unless you are very highly skilled on this champion. If you do put the hours in though, definitely does rise up. Yeah, those are my thoughts on the bot lane tier list. So if you enjoy the content, wait, I've lost my train of thought in this video, like at some point. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next one. Goodbye.